Lover, thank you for joining me today. First, we ask our Heavenly Father, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit to bless this show with divine wisdom. This is a talk show where we celebrate, debate, question, and interview topics that are happening around the whole of the Moana Pacific. Today, we have joined by Professor Dr. Afualo Salele, a Samoan economist, academic, and former MP who's a leading voice on education, economic development, and national growth in Samoa. He holds a PhD in economics and has earned the rare and prestigious title of Professor. Teaching at the National University of Samoa, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show again, Professor Salele. Welcome.
Talofa, Mike, and it's a pleasure once again to have me on your podcast so that we can share our insights about not just social and economic issues in Samoa, but we can also look at the Pacific in general and the world, because we are living in globalization. And we are a globalized village. The world has become a globalized village because of technology, and trade and everything. So yes, it's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you so much, Professor. And we love to have someone with your wisdom and your knowledge. We have to take full advantage of it. I just wanted to ask, during the week there was a few things coming up in Samoa. One of the things I wanted to talk about is the fires. There was a fire in one of the big shopping places there in Samoa. And, it was a massive fire. And also then a few days later there was another fire in a warehouse. Is this a normal thing in Samoa, Professor?
No, well, it happens once in a while. In the past, there were some big stores that also got caught up in fires like this. But this is very unbecoming when we have at least some of the largest providers of goods and services for the consumers, and we all feel where we live very close to Frankie, and also when we were on our way home that day, we were very concerned because just one block next to Frankie, one of my daughters resides with the family and the business. So we were quite concerned because the impact, you can feel the impact of the heat, but then thank goodness for our men, in uniform. They were there, the police, fire department. And then after that, we all felt for Frankie, the owner and the family, and all of those who, were able to earn a living, from Frankie's, chain of businesses, because there's a lot. Frankie is one of the largest provider of the supermarkets, and a lot of our people are also employed by that chain of supply, and we felt for them too. So whatever happened, we did, even up to now, we don't know the cause, and we suspect, a lot of those, talks that goes on the wire, and they tend to be pointing to some electrical faults, which started basically from the bakery, but we are not sure, because the truth will come out later. Yeah, and then after that, just 1 or 2 days, we have another warehouse. I mean, we're humans, Mike. We're humans. If we look at the history, not just Samoa, but we look at the whole of the world. From civilization to civilization, when series of events like this happen, people start to think outside the box. They they start to call on the supernatural expectations of why it happened, but that's the literature is littered with those. But although that it was probably an honest technical mistake, but we cannot stop people from from wondering, why, what's the cause of all of this? And after all, Samoa is a country founded on God, and we believe we're not superstitious, some people say that we are. No, we are not. We're religious, we're spiritual. And for anything that happens, there will always be, that linkage to that spirituality, and I think it's good, people are listening, even the theologians, there are three parts of the human components of the human creation. It's the soul, the spirit, and the body. So out of all of those three, there has to be a connection amongst the three so that you can link directly to God. So the spirit is the one, that, that's where God deals with us, because he owns that. And then we have the body, and in the body, we have the brain and all those, we can wonder, we can create, we can be entrepreneurs, this is where that gift, from God, the creative thinking. And then, of course, the body. And so the body, this is the carnal state of matter, Remember, matter is anything that you can touch, you can feel, and it must have weight. And when you go deep down in that matter, science has now understood that it's made up of many elements. You look at the periodic table. If you look at the chemistry, then you have the hydrogen, helium, and all of those. Even oxygen. So all of those components, they form us. Those are the single elements that they bind together through atoms, and then form compounds. And those compounds are are formed together to form us, the humans, the animals, and then the environment that surrounds us. And that's the beauty of God's creation. Scientists now understand that, no one, evolution cannot do that. So there has to be some intelligent design, but we know that, because in the beginning, God says, let us, make man, in the beginning, it's time, if you look at it, and that's how we measure, because space, when we measure, there's space, and then there, time, and then of course matter, and all of those, in the beginning, which is time, the earth, and then we have, which is the space, and then we have the world. So it's there. So you cannot argue that there is no God, because there has to be a power outside of those threes, that we measure things, through time. Then, Einstein and other great scientists, such as Newton, who, discovered the law of Newton, and all of them. They are all, particularly Newton, very devout Christians, even Einstein, later on in life. And so, from the viewpoint, the reason why I'm taking you off a little bit, because Samoa is a Christian country. And what has been happening recently in Samoa, there has to be a spiritual connection to that. And I honestly believe in that. Others may say, oh, Afualo is superstitious. No, if there is that super, intelligence that hovers outside, of space, time, and matter, which God created. So there has to be, the linkage amongst all of those, and I was recently trying to read through what's the latest development on semiconductor, the industry, which is, that's where all of this technology stands on, and it's interesting when you look at it because it's the transference of electricity, which is energy, the movement of the electron and the positive, and how fast and how close, and then whoever controls that is the one that controls the world. So that's why you see that the United States is super, and China is doing everything to catch up with with that technology, because all of the electronic materials that we have, computer and everything, sits the semiconductor. Remember, it's an agent that transfers energy, electrical charges, and then we have the non semiconductors. These are other elements, that do not conduct electricity. So it's interesting with how far we can go into understanding this. But this is what God, as a scientist and as an academic, when I read through this, it makes me, it makes me humble, humility, and I say, my gosh, And no wonder why King David said in the Psalm, the heaven, if you look above, it declares the glory of God, And then from day, to the evening, all of the word has been declared, And that has been, it's in the word many, 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 you're looking at hundreds of years. So, shall I be superstitious, Mike, but when we, from the economic standpoint, when we measure events, we have to look at the probability, This is econometrics, this is statistics. We have to look at the chance of the likelihood of an event that might happen, And so there are models, mathematical and economic models, finance models that predict the behaviors of humans, when it comes to consumers and all of that. And, we also look at this series of events because hardly, once in a while we have this. And then individually one can wonder, I hope, the glory of God has not divided us. I hope not, So I hope I can go on and on.
Yeah. You open up the subject because I'm fascinated when you talk about these things because, when you talk about religion and about God, I have a big, my own theory on things when it goes down that pathway. But I'm just curious, Professor, because we're on this subject. Because Samoa is, Christianity wasn't there all the time with Samoa. We had our own type of religion. What's your thoughts? Because some of the things in Samoa that haven't been touched, they haven't been, it hasn't even been unraveled on how much stuff there's in Samoa. Some of these pyramids, or you will say big mountains in Samoa, and we got a lot of our stories in our history, in our Samoa, which they talk about it, but it's still there and it's undercover a lot. What are your thoughts on that? I'm not trying to, I don't want to. What are your thoughts, Professor?
Like any other country, there are events and also what we call in Samoan Taratua that they allude to and they hold very dear to it. So we are not an exemption to that. We're not an exemption to the rule because our forefathers before Christianity came round about this is 1830. Yeah, this is and then a little bit before that were the missionaries that went to South Patea. So this is the history. But now going back before the gospel came, we had the Tangaloalangi, who resides in the ninth heaven, and then you have. But amazingly, when you look at the creation, because we don't know this, but we do have those. But if you look at this, the creation, God has categorized, the heavens. Although that there are only three, but Tangaloa Laringi seems, he resides on the ninth heaven. But we know that if we look at it, all of the other, substrata of the heavens, according to the Tangaloa Langi tradition, it's there, And, I'm glad that you have asked this, because what I now see there's a lot of new thinking, that comes along. But remember, we did not just convert, to Christianity by fluke. No, it was not a mistake that we became a Christian country. No, some years back, like historians are still, debating over the actual period of Nafanua, the era where Nafanua, lived, and also, what happened, the event that took place. I think this is somewhere like the 15th century or 16th, but anyway, but it's a fact, historical. No one, some academics, would want to entertain the idea of challenging the status quo. But look, I am a Afualo, the Malaifono, where, we hold meetings with Whaiai, from Whangatuli. And this sacred space in the Malaifono, it's called Malaiolama. And if you go back to the story of Nefadua and the war, that has resulted in this, it's true, because this is where, so when I hear, some academics here say the Nafanua story is a fairy tale, and it really, it pokes my heart. I say, my goodness, But that's the nature of academic, You can argue, and but you have to come up with findings, So they don't have findings, There are no facts, but I am a living testament of, that Malayan, because that's where when Nafanua started the war, from Alatawa, just to liberate that side of Sabai, because Lina Bayalva was so powerful with his, he ruled, all of those. And they, that famous Samoan proverb, that means if he, as he was gasping for, for help, because Mayaba and his warriors were so cruel, If one can only wonder when you look at what the Romans did, where they were also, the superpower, and then, look at every, empire comes through the Otto, one of the most cruel, the Islam, and then the latest one is the British, that came on. They're very cruel, very, very cruel, and then, the story, our some say, lost his life, and, but anyway, the story is that Mariatoa, at the time, and Sua, they were, because Samoa was not, was divided into war, warring zones, the Tuya Tua, the Tuya Ana, and all of this. So there was no one unified, other than the Tubanua on the eastern side. And then they said, so Marito went to, with Sua to Nafanua, seeking the direction, we want to know the future, and we want the blessings. So but Nafanua said, no, I'm sorry, I've given out all the, the blessings. So if you think of that, that story, Macbeth, with the three, seers. So whenever Macbeth wants, when he goes to war, he would always seek. So the three witches, the seers would, would go through their normal thing, and then they predict, you're going to win. And so he goes and so when they said that you were going to lose, and of course, that's why that famous speech, out brief candle, life but a walking shot. Anyway, coming back to this, so Nafanua said, I've given out. But all of uh, the cream or the crux, it's called our malo. She has already given to other paramount chiefs, but none was left. And then she gave this, um, prediction, to Manitoa and so on to go and await the arrival of the kingdom of heaven, and for them at that, 16th, 15th century, this is ridiculous,
Yeah.
I mean, the kingdom of heaven, we worship Kangaloa, Tangaloa, and yet, this is something very revolutionizing. And so they believed, because Nafanua had that supernatural gift from God, She was not only a warrior, but she also had that gift. She could be able to, foresee the future. And spiritually speaking, that's what the Holy Spirit gave her. And so they gave, and so, the story, this is history. They went back. Although, it's good that we're talking about this. Although that the first missionaries landed at, um, this is where Asiata, Satupatea, that's where Methodists,
Yep.
But Satupatea is, is part of Lalatoa, where Nafanua. So they're also part of this, but the actual prophecy was not fulfilled there. It had to be fulfilled at Manitoa, although that it was says, but they Lalatoa, this is all part of Nafanua's. And then, of course, later on, 1830, the missionaries went direct through the guidance of the Holy Spirit, And, for me, I haven't done this, but it's something that I had always thought about of writing a book about, the Nafanua prophecy and the kingdom of God to us. Because before Christ ascended, before he ascended to heaven, he gave the utmost commission to his followers, including the disciples, to go out, and preach the good news to all the towns, to all the countries of the earth. And then once it's completed, then the end, will come. But it's still going, and it's amazing. And that's more than 3,000 years ago, because it's over 2,000 the gospel, But Samoa, the Samoan archipelago, if you look at it from Manua, going all the way to Savai, and then if you look further, towards the east, the west of Savai, you have the French territories there with Polynesian, Wallis and Fortuna, and there's a huge Samoan influence there. So, and sometimes I wonder, for a greater Samoa, we can, maybe later on, when all these superpowers, and then we can have from Manua to, but that's just, but anyway. So interestingly, Christ knew that there were some of his children living in our islands, in the Samoan archipelago and other parts of the South-Pacific. That's more than 2,000 years. And that's why, so when missionaries came, they didn't just come, although that they went out, but they came through that spiritual guidance. And that's why, for me, it's very special, when we have the Constitution, when the Constitution was signed, by our forefathers, there was nothing. It's founded on God. But now you see new thinking, new thoughts, Some, come and say all this, nonsense. But you got to stick to it, because once you die, you divest from it, then you won't get the blessing. And I think that's, I am not a prophet, but that is something for us Samoans, not just here, but Samoans who reside, the diaspora. Because, I'm really proud to be a Samoan, like you, even our, regardless of our disagreements about political views, that's okay. But we are Samoans. We are Samoans, and everywhere we go, even myself, educated in Australia, and then eventually Canada, I took my heritage and, even, but then having said that, where Samoans go, not just from here, the first thing they do, they will set up a church. Believe me or not, this is true. This is a fact. Whether you go to Australia, wherever part, you go to New Zealand, even in Canada, there are now, even in Alaska, even if you go to South America, that's the first thing. And that prophecy is still there because that's our foundation. That's the Constitution. But when new thinkings, come in and try to challenge it, I say, hey, stop it, stop it, I live, as a living testament, and others, from Salele, the Malayalam, because this is where, the war ends, Nafanu. And then just a little bit further, there's another famous saying, Nafanu was told that once you reach that, there's a fence, but yel pai fola, on the swallow to the one, that means, have to stop the war, to end the war there, because she was destroying the warriors. And then like saying, what does it mean by Malayalam? It's it's all understood, because this is where the Mayaga warriors finally realized that when the wind, because they were fighting, and then all of a sudden, they saw that she was a woman. She was a woman warrior. So, and so they were so afraid, and they were not only, ashamed, but even, even nothing or two, because she didn't want to expose that she was a woman, but she had that very special, from that story. I mean, it's good for all of us to understand, because there's a linkage in all of this to the Tangaloa language, those, but that has been replaced to the true God, the God of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, the God of this world, and the whole of the galaxies.
Yes. So
that's in a nutshell, just to...
It's a big topic. It's a big topic, because I know a lot of us, diaspora, we love, there's a big reassurance of, a lot of us, we are very intrigued of our culture, and I study a lot about our culture. And, some of the things I analyze when I see in our culture in the Samoa, this is how proud I am to be Samoan. And my partner, she is Māori. So she's a New Zealand background, but I am so proud of our culture. And so from what I can see and analyze, I see our culture is, when here in Australia and New Zealand, and I might be wrong, but out of all the Pacific Islander nations, our country, Samoans, we seem to be the well formatted, we have a community that is very well based. We've got many different churches here in Australia, and I'm pretty sure we've got many in New Zealand. And it's formed, like you got Samoan churches in these different countries. And it's very well organized. And I'm thinking, the Tongans they're not that bad, The Fijians, I feel like we do a little bit better than the Fijians as well, even though they got a lot more population than us. And the Māoris are a little bit, they're not real, as close as how our communities are. We got massive Mekokisi church here, it's big here in Australia. The Catholics are big. So, and I'm thinking, and just to come back to what you're saying about Ngāwhanua and how she gave out the land to the kufa, the land to everyone in Samoa. It kind of paints the picture that Samoa had a government. It had a government before the missionaries come in. And I'm not sure how the other countries in the Pacific are, but I don't see any other government formation as well drilled as Samoa when it comes to Ana, Atua, the Tuamasanga districts. It's very well formatted, and I feel like in the future, and this is where for the future of our diaspora, to kind of open up what in our past can we open up so we can learn from our history. But that in a nutshell, it's a massive topic, Afualo, and I'm so passionate about that. But yeah,
You know, it's good that you have raised that because even our the children who grow up, you know, here in Samoa, they still need to understand who they are and where they, you know, they came from, and that's why you know, Samoan language is so ingrained into the curriculums with English, you know, because those are the two. And as they, you know, move up to higher education, they tend to be learning more and more about it. And you know, we're very fortunate. You raised a point about before missionaries came. You know, there was a social cohesion. You know, the cultural structure that, you know, binds us, of course. You know, but because we had you know, what the paramount chiefs, you know, because at the time before this Nafanua prophecy, you know, we had the Tuya Anga, you know, and his dynasty, and then we have the Tuya Tua, and then we have Maliato, you know. So they were all, you know, you're looking at the paramount chiefs. So whichever, whoever you would want to support. And beneath that, it stands of this very, very solid Matai system. You know, if it wasn't for that, you know, it just doesn't work, you know. And that's why when I look at the current situation now for any government trying to interfere with the Pulengali and Faipule, you know, I'm very disappointed because that is the heart of the Samoan, you know. And when the church came, you know, Marito, you know, that's why Susunga, you know, the Sunga is given to the ministers, you know, and then the Catholic went to and so they were given the Efionga to Patele, you know, and even with the Methodists as well. So that's how, you know, and then when Malitoa Fitzamanu was, you know, was going to pass on, you know, he just gave a will, you know, I mean, that he would go to the grave with all the four, you know, paramount, you know, titles, you know, which is, you know, what we call Kamai. So after that, we've never had a one clan, you know, to hold the four, these supreme titles. They all went back to where they, you know, they traditionally belong, and then it's still uh, so. And that's the truth, you know. That's a fact behind, you know, because Malieto, you know, his grandfather who received them, you know, this prophecy from Nafanua knew it, and so it had to be fulfilled. So once he accepted, you know, this is it, you know, and sooner or later I'm going to face my maker, you know, I'm going to face God, you know. So he gave that very, very, very powerful, you know. He said, I would be the last one to hold all the Tafaifa, you know. And it's amazing, you know. And so all the other, you know, except the Malito, you know, says the Malito clan, the others, you know, the Tuyatua went to like in Taafa. Probably sooner or later, my friend, your dad would hold that. But anyway, the point is that, and that's a fact, historical fact. So whoever Samoans who comes around, because what is happening now with education, this is the biggest challenge of our traditional values, not just us, but look at other countries as well. Now with the new thinking, you know, the Enlightenment and all these, you know, these new theories about no, economics is different, you know, because economics caters for the wealth, the accumulation of the physical wealth, so that we can be able to, you know, to live in harmony. You know? But when you look at, you know, philosophy and all, there's a lot of writings here. And interesting, I look at some of them, you know, these are the authors thinking, you know, but they challenge the status quo. And so when you read, if you're not prepared for this, then you end up believing that. So I always remind, my students, whether they are in the final year, uh, uh, you know, economics and finance, or, at the postgrad level. I always remind them, open up your mind, be a critical thinker, Don't just take yes for everything. Don't just believe everything that you see and everything that you hear. No, because even Christ, taught us that you have to challenge the status quo, and then from that, then we are able, you understand, and then you ask the Holy Spirit, for us Samoans, and, that's a core, to make sure that you hold on to it, and the Holy Spirit will not depart from you. But a lot of what has been happening now, I come from a family, of my father and my uncles, I have cousins who are missionaries, And I'm telling you, Mike, it's testament to others who are also listening. There was something, mysterious about it. And I always tell my children, stay the course, this is the way. Like Christ taught us, I am the way, truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father, but only through me. So when we go on, we make sure, I have some friends who happen to visit some of the islands in Papua New Guinea, even the Greater Melanesia, because that part of the Pacific, our forefathers were responsible for taking the gospel to them. After we received, and then they took off. But I hear a lot of stories, that some were successful, and they are, but some were also martyred, just like when Paul and Christ, disciples, and they were martyred, and some of our missionaries, at that time, more than 100 years ago, who took the gospel to PNG, Solomon's, Vanuatu, they ended up, but through that, that seed, of martyrdom, the gospel grew, And I remember this one story. One of I think the first prime minister of Vanuatu is Father Walsalini, I think he's probably a Catholic or Anglican, but he was, but the story behind is that from where he came from, one of the islands, that is where one of the Samoan missionaries, the husband and the wife were martyred, and if you read this, you kind of, and I hear this from in Canada, because our church, and our minister, who is an evangelical, is an academic, and then he told this story, and I thought, my gosh, and I didn't know that it was, it was talking about us, the missionaries from Samoa that went there and got, killed because of the faith. And as a result, they say that when they were praying, and I think the warriors, even, because a lot of these islands were cannibals like us, sometimes, and then the news just spread out, and so the tribes, came with their drums and they bang, that they are going to have a great feast the next morning, and it did. But the missionaries, they were kneeling, praying, praying, and it's amazing. And then they eventually killed them. But so they dismembered the bodies and have the bodies, covered with, kamu, the tamu leaves and banana leaves, on the Malay Fondo. And then all the other chiefs will come and they will have a great feast tomorrow. And amazingly, when they came, the fire was burning, and then, they bang all the drums. when they removed, the coconut leaves and everything, even the banana leaves, they couldn't believe what they saw. They dismembered the body last night, and yet when they removed the coverage, they are still bleeding. Yeah, the bodies are still bleeding. We know that we understand the body system. Once you bleed, it only bleeds for some time because you have a certain quantity of the blood. Once that is being drained out, then it's dried, like if you slaughter a cattle but not in this case, they were still bleeding, and so from, and then they said, the chief said, "Mike, these are holy people. These are holy." So their feast that they were going to, all of a sudden it was, and that was the point of convergence, They were, and so they set up, there's a memorial, a stone there. And this island, this is where the first Prime Minister of Vanuatu came from, Father Motolini, you see and then amongst that, there are many, many other, amazing stories about missionaries from Samoa, not just Samoa, but others, who went to Vanuatu, Solomons, and even Papua New Guinea, and they're still doing it nowadays. They're going to Africa, South America. So the foundation or the constitution of Samoa, it's very unique. It's founded on God. So a lot of Christian countries now are going back to revisit and re-examine. So they need to find where, how it all started. Like even now with Donald Trump, the United States, wow, the Christian movement and even in other parts, although that Europe was kind of, backsliding, backsliding because of the, of the wealth, and because once you seem to be having all the necessities in life, then you can say, but this is it. Why should I? But sooner or later, that life will be taken away. Because that breath, that life, the spirit belongs to God. It doesn't belong to you or me. My body, goes back to, the decomposers, they break up and they, all the different elements, they go back. And then the process, that natural process will continue.
Yep.
But what we have learned to do, through reasoning, rational and everything, they are all recorded in the book of life. And your spirit will be judged for that. And that's what the Bible says.
Yeah.
That's what the Bible says. So I always remind my students about, look, I'm not trying to scare you, but you're young, you're the future of Samoa, but always remember where you came from, where I came from. Samoa is founded on God. With the Prime Minister's, drive and attempt to, to go back to that. For me, there's nothing wrong with it. But he has to make sure, because of the Constitution, it provides this freedom of worship for everybody. But we know that Samoa is a Christian country, and I think that was what, Dr. Tulepa changed, rather than having that in the preamble. So they bring that inside the body of the Constitution, where God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the Trinity.
Yes.
That's, that's us. That's us. So it's amazing, and I'm very thankful for our program, because
it's a big subject.
And I hope, those who are listening, will learn something from it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not trying to intimidate someone or trying to, no, I'm just talking about my experience and the reality, of what happens if life is taken away from you. Life is taken away from you. And I always remind my grandchildren, sometimes they just sit down and eat, And I said, fine, look, Well, look, so some in Catholics, some in they all of a sudden, they do the the Fakorusia, and others say, because I have to instill in them that I have to instill in them, because that's what Psalm 103 says, never ever forget any of His blessings. Every single blessing that God has given us, you, me, your children, you must always remember that when it counts and give back, just the glory, because it's not yours, it's not mine, even our program, what happens when our motor, was asked or was instructed to cease temporarily. I said to the well, let's obey. There's nothing wrong. Later, when it's finished, then we can go back. Without knowing, that this program is now,
Yeah.
it's now, a byproduct of it. But God works in mysterious ways.
That's right.
You just never know. One door closes, and another one opens up. So I'm happy that this program now is in full English, so that we can be able to reach a much bigger audience,
Yeah.
not just Samoans, but others, the English speakers who would want to understand, and even learn something from our, from our podcast. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's a massive. I love talking about this. I could talk about this with you for all day, Professor. I'll move to other questions because I know other people like to talk about the politics, but it's still close by. When you talk about it, you talk about the ali'i faipule. It's a big subject, this one. So I'll get into it because I don't want to. I want to answer these questions with you, but it's a big talking point here in Samoa. The Fa'asale le anga number 2. It's under the spotlight at the moment, and I seen yesterday there was a post that come through from Samoa Observer that said that they have reinstated Mangele, or they have looking to choose Mangele to be back as the chairperson. I was a little bit saddened by that because, I wanted to. My thoughts on this is standing for what the people want, and we've seen what took place with the Prime Minister and the media outlets pushing and pressuring some of the members in this district. I just wanted to know your thoughts on this, Professor, as a Samoan living in Samoa. What are your thoughts on this issue?
Good. I know that there's been a lot of media coverage on the issue, from here and also from abroad. But my 2 cents, on the topic, this is a democratic country. Whoever is selected to lead whatever government, they just come and go. They have to know that. The FAST and also HRBP and even, the Tutu and others. So in the moment that you are at the driver's seat, like Laudi, as a good leader, you'll have to look at policies that will bring unity, because at the moment there's no unity. There's no unity. And I'm telling you that, if they're listening, if the VAS supporters, and that's a fact. So, and it's good, so whoever opposes this, the $2 million project, it's good to have an opposition, because that sets you apart, from the others, and that will also act as a guidance for you and how you disperse the funds, because these are not the FAST funds. These are the people, these are the taxpayers. So all the only reason why they are in charge is because they won the election. That's democracy. But when you set out policies, you make sure that you are covering for the whole. But when you categorize such a policies to ensure that the ruling government, is at the driver's seats for all of this, and I don't think that's, right. You know, honestly speaking, you know, if you want the trust of the opposition, then you make sure, you know, you do it the right thing because, um, you know, truth hurts, you know, but that's how we go, you know, and it would eventually lead to something that we don't want, you know. And as we continue to provide that opposition, it will also um, enhance, you know, that that solid and I would say intellectual intelligence from the government to stay the course, to stay the course. You know, don't do this, don't do this, because at the end of the day, yeah, we know that, you know, he shall search for the truth. And the truth will make you free. So no, we're not free. You know, we're not free. You know, and you know, suppose I was, of course, you know, I was leading, and I would make sure, you know, those who were genuinely elected by their constituency, they should, you know, be at the because at the end of the day, the buck stops with the government. So even if the HRBP leadership, you know, those who won at the seat at the tribal seat for this project, the final saying comes from the government. You see what I mean? You see. So for me, I can't see any. What's the rationale of trying to, you know, to put all of, you know, of the FAS members, whether, you know, into the leadership of this, but then, you know, it comes back to you. So if you put a HRBP there, for example, for Salele, the final say comes from Laudi. You can imagine, you know, because they are the ones who.
Is that a scary thing, Professor? Is that something a little bit concerning if it was like that, you're saying?
Well, you know, the reality is when we look at history, you look at history, you know, politics and political divisions, you know, would ultimately lead to something that we don't want, you know. But a good politician, where, you know, if you study the history of great empires, you know, a brilliant politician would look at, you know, would maneuver the policies to make sure that, you know, that everybody is being accommodated to. And I believe if this was done, you know, according from like what Fasale did, you know, and they will, you know, fully support. But even if they say this, you know, and I think now we're seeing the threat that comes from the government, you know, of not dispersing the funds to them. You cannot do that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
honestly,
that's a big, yeah.
you cannot. As a leader, as a prime minister or whatever, you know, you cannot, because you know, these constituencies, you know, they want them. And there's always a court, you know, and if you are not happy, you know, look at what's happening with United States, and every time that Trump tries to, you know, to sign an executive, you know, directive, then you see the judges, you know, from the Democrats, and then they all come and then finally the courts, you know, and then when, you know, when everything, you know, it's settled down, they go to the court, and it ends up that, you know, most of the cases Trump, you know, won, you know, because you're doing the right thing, you know? And it's the same thing with this, you know, if FAST thinks that they can bulldoze this, I don't know. You can't do it like that, and it will end up with embarrassment, you know. So bringing, you know, the people together, you need, you know, intelligent, strategic thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know? Because that will avoid because the last thing, I'm not trying to put the words in their mouths, you know, of the HRPP, but for me as an outsider looking into it as a critique, you know, that's, you know, how it should happen. You know? Bring them together, because the prime minister is the final. The buck stops with him, the decision stops with him. So I can't see any of this, you know, saying that. No. If you put the HRBP there, you have the final say. But at least, you know, that tension is now being smoothed. But when you create that tension, and then it seems that you are rowing one-sided, you know, then the court will come in. And for me, I feel, for the government to, 5 years is a long years, If you want to do it right now.
Yeah.
They say that your enemies, you bring your friends close, but you bring your enemies closer to you.
That's right.
So, this is 101 political science.
Professor.
So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, just to add on to what you're saying there, because I like to analyze things. So I look at teams. I look at things like if you have a model that you can look at, and then you can base it off. For myself personally, if a team has a model, a winning formula, it's good to go to that formula. The thing with this project, right? Yes, Lauli is the Prime Minister of Samoa, but like the way I'm looking at it, it's like as his project vision. For people that are critiquing it and looking at it, we would like to see more transparency so we can see the vision where he's trying to push the direction, trying to push this project towards. But just for what I can see, there's a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of non-transparency, and that's where I'm trying to figure out like, hey, okay, that makes me unsafe to believe in this project, because you got to show us a formula or give us an example somewhere else. Then we can look at that formula and say, okay, I can see where you're going here. But what I can see here with this project, it's like because there's not much transparency or detail on what's happening around this and this, we can't predict. As you as well, you can't predict where is this going unless you have a different insight, Professor. Do you have an insight?
Yeah. See the model. I mean, the others are listening. Even the fast, even loud. Because it's our idea. It's our concept. It was in our manifesto, and the whole argument behind, this rationale. I said to the Tertiary, look, we need to make sure that there are some fundings available for the development. The rural areas, and even and I want the ownership, to be transferred to them. And having said that, we need to develop a solid structure of making sure that we disperse the funds, like you alluded to, transparently.
Yeah.
So the last 4 years under FIAB, I hope they have had some sort of framework already in place to ensure that these funds are being dispersed. Because at the end of the day, these are national funds, government, your fund, our fund. And they are accountable to transparency and accountability, and they have to be audited. I mean, that's why they have the officer. Officially, they have the chair, and then there are, I don't know how many employees who are employed, and that's a significant portion of of the fund goes into the salaries of this management employees. And then at the same time, they are the ones who make sure that they adhere to the criteria, and it should be in law now. They should bring, the laws to apply that. And if you look at it, from the economics viewpoint, rather than the government solely dispersing the funds like what happened, under Tulepa, through the Ministry of Women. I mean, not necessarily, but they channeled it through them. And then there is a relationship, like the Pulelu, Sweet Vaitai, and they're the ones that relate to the ministry. Whatever projects, whatever developments, that they would look into it, give them the framework, because this is public funding. You cannot just give them whatever they want. They have to say, "Oh, we want this is a project," and then so either they initiate the project or the project is being initiated by the ministry. But what I'm now seeing, this is why we came up with the idea. We need the initiative to be from, the stakeholders, and the stakeholders in this case, this the constituencies, and then the funding is there, but we have to make sure that the fund is properly used. There were some cases, in the previous 1 million project. I think they're still going through that, but we should learn from that. We should learn from that, and I hope that as we move forward, with with harmony, once all the chairmanships and all the committees have been settled, then we should look more into that, huh? and let us look into the structure, and that's how it should be. My my only concern is that this developmental project, I hope it will not lead to becoming a welfare entity.
Yes, yeah, right.
That's my fear, because I know, when you look at socialist, thinking, that economic thinking, socialism or capitalism, it's usually, driven through this. So in this case, rather the government, they are the ones, they control this, but the disbursements of the funds, there is that committee. And then at the same time, the stakeholders, the villages, the districts, whatever developments are. And so there has to be harmony in this. And I hate to say this, but I see that the way it's being laid out, free market is kind of iffy now. You know what I mean? The concept of capitalism using this project now, because now it seems that it's a one-way control system. You are not, actually giving room for
it to grow.
The supply and demand functions to breathe. And if that's the case, it won't. I tell you that it will fail. It will fail. Yeah. So that's from. Yeah, that's from the economics, social and economics.
Professor, if I was in Prime Minister's spot right now, in his situation, I would definitely be calling your number up and asking someone with your expertise or someone to at least help him with the framework. Because I think that's the issue that, as from my opinion, from outside looking in, you just need a framework, a system that at least people can kind of stand on and go, hey, okay, this is where we're moving towards. But it seems like there's a lot of grey areas, as I said before, and even now the supporters are starting to get confused with some of the stuff that they're not even sure themselves. But as I said, I have respect for the Prime Minister and the government. But it's when people think that we're trying to pull them down, I feel that's the wrong.
No, they shouldn't think that way.
Yeah, but
I mean, this is. I know where you're getting at, because the more criticism that we put forward, and that's better, I mean, for you, for whoever is leading the country, that should also give you a much stronger urge to prove to us that they are right. You know what I mean? Yeah. So having that opposition voice should not become a hindrance to growth. No, it shouldn't. It should only enable, Lauli, the Prime Minister and his cabinet, strength, to push forward and prove it to the critics that they are wrong.
Yeah.
But then if they continue on with the way they look at it from the political lens, thinking that they are right. I tell you, because looking at history, and history is, you just look at, why governments fail.
Unless we can't see something, Professor, unless we can't see something that Lauri can see, unless we're not seeing something, but that's just from what we can see, not trying to...
No, I think since, 4 years under FMA, and the management of the project, they should already got a good framework, for the project to be operated on. But it seems that they are now developing a new framework. It seems that they don't want to follow what, FMA and her cabinet. And I think that's where the problem is. but there are, there are some good advices there. I mean, and as a prime minister, you're not lacking of any advices, because you can just ask the IMF, ask World Bank, they will come, or even UN,
Okay.
or even our friends like
Yep.
New Zealand, Australia,
Yep.
Fiji, they will come,
Oh,
they say,
okay.
okay, even China,
Yep.
we will send advices,
Cool.
but I don't know where communication breaks down, because when you have a mindset that this is how we're going to do it, and this is how, you know, yeah, you're going to face the huge, a huge wall,
Yeah.
But he has to accept. I
Yes.
mean, the fast government has to accept critics. There's nothing wrong with, even when Tulepa was also running the country. Oh, believe me, because I read, there was so much negative critics, to the old man. But then now we look at it, once the dust is now settled, they were all baloney, if we use, they were all garbage, But this is politics.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I said, but we make sure that the policies that we put in place, will be beneficial to our children and, our children's to come, for the future posterity of Samoa,
Professor, have you? So you're living in Samoa. Just have you benefited by anything? Have you benefited from this project in any way from your constituency? That's the question. What's your experience with this project? Have you benefited or anything from this? That's the question I have. And also, sorry, Professor, just so you can also add on another question, and also the policies, because just like you have in church, like you in a church, when you're bringing money into the church, the minister comes up and he ends up giving you how much money was brought into the church, etc., right? Is with this project for your constituency? Is there a system like that so people know where the money of the 2 million come in or 1 million? Can you share some light on for us, people in the outside?
Let me go to your first question.
Yep.
Did I receive any benefit from it? A big no. What? No, I didn't.
Okay.
And that's, to be honest, for me, I don't care about myself, because God has been good to me and my family, so we are able to provide that, and then helping others too. But we need to analyze and assess the last 4 years under FMA, because a lot of that money was translated in the forms of working capitals, for to promote the farming communities. Suo, Sapelu, I was told, and if someone gets that, even a mobile, that's fine, But that's within like 1 year, But if you continue to dish out those benefits year in, year out, then it's no longer, you're not reaping the benefits, because there are many ways to skin the cat, You can go and get something from them, whether it's weed eater, the mobile, whatever, or the India thieves, sorry, you can just go and get it. And given the economic situation, the hardship, you won't hesitate to sell it. You won't, because there's no follow-up, and that's why, if you look at it, this is just like loans that have been granted by central bank, development bank and other institutions too, like for farming and all of them. So that fund is supposed to be providing for those equipments, those capital items. And then the loan officers are also expected to have a visit, to follow up whether, the money, because it was loaned from them, went into the furnishing of those. In most cases, it's fun. Some of the cases, yeah, when they went, the recipients, they just go through and say, oh, and then it end up like either primary, because they use the money, you know, they use the money for other purposes like whether falabelade or or weddings and so on. So it failed the whole purpose. And if they don't do it the right way, this is the same. This project is going to be because you have to follow up and monitor, where those are. You're getting my point?
The framework.
So
yes.
so yeah, there's nothing new.
Yep.
Because I used to work in the agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture, the tourism, and also customs, and I know what I'm talking about, And then after that, I spent most of my later years now as an academic, So I talk about those. So I hope they look at it and learn from the mistakes, So there has to be a follow up of how many thousands, because there's a lot of money, 2 million per year for a district. And if there are, for example, like from Salele, where I'm from, and there's about 5 villages, and out of that 5, they should get an equal share, of this 2 million per year, and that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So if you divide it, depending on the size of the population of other villages, you still get a huge amount. You still get a huge amount, and that amount has to be accounted for literally, and then the committee, and this is where my concern is: the Fono Fa'avai able to, to go and reassess, whether these items are still available, because after 1 year, they will come and ask again, but they've already sold those. You're getting my point?
Yeah.
And this is human, I'm not trying to discourage, because it's a good project. I'm telling you that. Sulepa would also concur with me, but you have to do it in the right way. Because the only difference is that it was done through the Ministry of Women, Sulepa, and his, where the proper administration, with servants, public servants were involved. But now, we're now moving outside of that sphere. So hopefully that these committees will be able to follow up with the assessment of that.
Yes, for sure.
And then the auditing will come, because the auditors will come.
We're looking for the audit, yeah.
And then the other question is I think it's offering. I said,
just the numbers, like when you do you have maybe a council meeting where the whole village comes in and this is where this money went, that kind of audit. It's almost like an audit for the council district. Do you have anything like that in this project, or is that not a thing?
There were criteria that were given out, but those were just broad criteria, It's just like when a law is drafted and then passed by Parliament. That's not the end of it. They have to develop, what we call regulation, So the regulations are the these portions of the law, that explains and how it is. So I don't know, whether that has already been done. It should. How to disperse those funds, and if giving out, 500 or maybe 1,000 tala to the Fa'afeau when Fa'afeau comes to conduct the opening ceremony, they should mention that in the because if it's in the regulations, then that's legal. But if it's not, then the Fono Fa'avai will be accountable. They have to pay for it, not the fund, not your fund. It's our fund. I mean, for me, as an academic, you have to really stipulate things black and white. Once you have that by law, then no one, because if you break the law, then it's your own, undertaking. And you don't blame others, because you broke it. Just like, the last 4 years, with the disbursement of that fund, some MPs were implicated, and that's very sad. So I hope that this 2 million, because that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
2 million. If you multiply that by 51, that's more than 100 million a year. But you see, there's a shift in the development approach now from government using there is a national plan, but that national plan now seems to be focusing on other aspects of development. But for the development of the districts and the villages is now under the umbrella of this funding. So it's very, very important. If the Matais from other districts, if they complain, if they're not satisfied, then so be it. And ask why, and if if their concern is valid, then we have to change, But if their concern is valid and then you don't want, you do what you think, then that's not good.
Yeah.
That's not good, because at the end of the day, you won't get, you won't achieve, the growth that we are looking for. And then all of this has to come from the budget, has to come from the budget.
It's very
But
interesting.
the whawhiao, the whawhiao kakusi, I don't know under the new criteria whether that is part of it.
Maybe there's some loopholes there we can do. Because this subject, it links to other subjects. We're talking, the next question here, it's linked to the $18.5 million that Laoli has said that he's going to give to the kids to pay off the school fees and also pay for, I'm not sure who's paying the teachers. It's been a thing where they usually feed the teachers, and who's going to feed the teachers now? Because he said it's going to be taken away. What are your thoughts on this? Because it's got to be under, I don't know if I'm right about this, but this project of the school fees now falls under the district. Is that right, Afualo? I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
Yeah, well, the current practice, from Tulepa, from HRVP, the government subsidy, they pay for school fees from year 1 up to year 11. That was when year 13 was still part of the structure of high school, my colleges. So now we only have 12, 1 to year 12. So from what I understand, I don't know what was the change. So government pays 1 up to year 10, and I think it should still be there. And they, no, up to year 11, sorry. And then year 12, that is the responsibility of the parents.
Yeah, okay.
Year 12 and university, wherever you go, if you want to go to ESP for foundation, even outside the parents will pay for that.
Yeah.
Unless you don't get a scholarship, but it's mostly on the parents' shoulders. The challenge is that from year 1 up to year 11, the fees, most of the fees in all the schools, primaries and colleges, high schools, they're quite manageable. The parents can be able to pay for that through the government assistance. This initiative was started by New Zealand and Australia. And I think people need to understand that. And then under Dr. Tulepa's leadership, they negotiated. And then for some years, the program was functioning through aids from Australia and New Zealand. And then after that, when the project was phased out, the government took over, in its budget, from Tulepa as well. So it continues on with the current, the current government. But the challenge lies at year 12. Year 12, it's very expensive. Once you reach year 12, wherever school, the fees will be different. And also you have to pay for Sasalasi, this is secondary certificate, in order for you to be able to write those exams and be qualified to enter anywhere through the foundation. So that is not under the jurisdiction of the government. It falls on the parents. And then after that, if you make it to the university, the foundation, it's solely on the parents, and it's very expensive. The expenses are even, 2 or 3 times higher than that. And a lot of parents, for the parents who have kids that were able to accepted at NUS, through the normal Sasalasi, who came from Savai, the rural areas here and also Savai. You can see, I've seen it, and I've been doing enrollment. I've been signing off for students who are able to move forward, and those that need some counseling for quite some time now. And it's you look at the faces, the parents that come, and you can see that there is something not right, because the enrollment during the registration, so it's very expensive. On the top of that, you'll have to pay, the subjects. So under the foundation, there are about 10 subjects that you have to take. And then out of the 10, it's the top 8, the best 8 with English, and then, so a lot of the parents, you feel for them because there's no, and I am very, very glad when this initiative came, if there is any big plus for the $1 million project, this is one of the, the best, I would say one of the positive, achievements of the projects, because a lot of parents who were unable to finance the year 12 and the 3rd, and also the foundation are now, university, they were paid by Kumsaba, and that's really good,
That's good.
And that's just one part of it. So it pushes, it pushed the academic enthusiasm of the kids, because the parents are no longer, are worried about. One of the cases when I was a dean, at the time, before I went into politics, this is 2005, up to 2014, I think 15. So it's almost 10 years. I was a dean of faculty of business and entrepreneurship. And, when it comes to enrollment, I had to really look at the parents, and the kids say, oh my gosh, But there are very limited scholarships available, very limited, from the private sector and also assistance from the government. And I remember one of the cases, one of the students, one of the parents, he came to me and begged if there is any financial assistance. I said, yes, there is a program, but you'll have to get this letter from, the clergy, and then you apply for that. Then we'll consider it, because your case, your child's case is basically, it's based on, the level of income, you can. And some of my colleagues who had children who applied, to get this very limited door that we opened, to assist. They even called me, and they said, why did you do this? Because they heard from their, the students' friends that she got I gave the award, and they didn't get the apply, and they thought that I was, thinking whether it's a family. I said no, we have a policy. It's a university policy, and we only disperse those funds to those who are less, very, regardless, we have to give them. And then I said to some of my friends, look, you're working, you have a lot of money, you can pay, but this is for, and then they never said, they said, okay, doctor. I said, because that's the rationale why we develop, that kind of policy.
Yeah.
So now with this $2 million, and it gives a lot of, oomph, to the hopes of the parents, because once you enter a foundation, there are limited scholarship awards, even if you move up to the degrees, whether it's Australia, New Zealand, or USP, or even NUS, or anywhere, you can't afford. Unless you are a son of, some of this very, local. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that a lot of students my students, who graduated, with Bachelor of Commerce, their fees were paid by,
Wow, that's good.
last year,
Yep.
which is good, and
Yeah.
I feel very happy. I said, good, good. I tell you, the father who came to me and I gave the scholarship, one of the fathers, I said, look, now the girl passed, and now she is going to, she got a scholarship to Fiji, to USP, and the old man said, oh, I slaughtered, a cattle, huh? So he has, few, and so I slaughtered one, and now, if I slaughtered the others, my stock will, so he has no money, so, and then I called the girl, I said, look, you have to really, really work hard, what your father did, and then with this award, and then now you're going to USP, which is good, but I advise, don't go. Do it here. You have the scholarship. You can do your Bachelor of Commerce here. You stay, beside your father and your family, and you will do well, because I understand the university life, especially the first, second year. Oh man, you know what I mean. It's just party here, party there, and then all of a sudden you fail. Yeah, you just don't fail because you don't know. No, these are, brilliant students, but they just party. And then all of a sudden they fail. Now they want to a second chance. So at the moment, I think to that part, they were very strict. I said, well, you've got to do something to this. You're not going there to party, whether it's USP or even anywhere somewhere. You're going there to study. And I think that solved that problem. So now with the $1 million project, and I'm very happy. I think we should also give them, allow the credit, for, particularly under FIME. You remember, it started from,
That's right.
FIME and there. So if there is any positive, this is one of it, because it's called, one of my nieces and my wife's nieces, she has been, the fund, the fund has been helping her. She's a law student, you see this as an example. So her third year, she's now was funded by that, she did it online through USP, and now she's now in Vanuatu, because the policy, they only the only scholarship available are very limited, and Fonfavai, is sponsoring her expenses and everything. You gotta make use of this fund, and then for those who are in charge, they said, okay. And so she's now in Vanuatu, finishing her final year, which is said, I said, you go finish. Don't worry about that. That burden, that financial burden is now being looked after. So if there is any plus, this is one of the, and I think my only plea to Laoli, if he wants this to be successful, he has to do it the right way. And then where all of us, both HRBP, SUP, Independence, and FAST come together to promote this at the maximum, to maximize profit, whether it's social profit or economic profits, out of it, because it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Thank you for that insight. Yeah, it's a massive subject. Professor, I wanted to get your insight because there's another question here I wanted to get your opinion on, because I know it's a little bit in your background. There's going to be a pay rise of $6, and I wanted to know, how does this, as from your background, how do you make this judgment? Is it something where if I was the Prime Minister, I can just come in and say, hey, let's just lift it up to $6. If it's at $4, let's just lift it up to $6. Or is there some kind of guidance that the PM or them will go off? What can you give us some insight, please?
Yeah, good. I know during the campaign, this was one of the issues that was brought up by FAST. I think, I may be wrong, but they were promising somewhere like up to 10 tala, but they can correct me, but and then some of my colleagues asked me, is that economically feasible? I said, well, we have to look at the GDP, because that's where everything is accounted for. And at the time, the GDP, the 3 billion was not yet out. The figures from IMF, and then of course. So we had about 3 tala 3 tala 50 cents. That was from Tulepa, from 250 and 290, and then 350, and then up to, I think, 4. So it went up to 480, I think. Yeah, because I haven't seen the figures, because I always collect the figures for my students,
Okay.
because I give them these figures for development economics, so that they can understand, why we move. Now, one thing that one needs to understand, the minimum wage, although it's an economic yardship, this is where you start, when you finish, whether or even if you don't finish, and normally this is being taken up by unskillful workforce. I mean, in the sense, that's how it started. So the government, it's a political government, has the final say. Whether this is all over, but the government's decision has to be based on actual economic data. So under Tulepa's regime, it went up to 350, and I think it went, and I can understand why, because the GDP under Tulepa was it reached 2 billion, and then fell a little bit lower because of the natural catastrophes we've had, in diseases and all of those. So, and then it came back. So when FAST came into power with FMA, so the GDP was still moving up. By the time this year, Laoli and Monitor, came, it's now over 3 billion. But at the time when I was in Parliament, when trying to raise the minimum wage from 290 up to 350, our committee looked into it. We had to, and we called all the stakeholders, particularly from the private sector, because this is a government, the final say. But we need to make sure what the private sector. So when the private sector came, at the time, Yasaki was still in Samoa. So representative from Yasaki, didn't really, buy the idea of going all the way up to 350, because we had other, we had other categories like 4, or could be more. But we knew, I knew why, Yasaki was insisting on, on the 350, because they have more than, I think, 1,000 workers, employees. So, and most of those probably, I would say 80% are under the minimum wage. So imagine one pay, let's say 4 tala at the time, this is 2017, when I was in those committees. If you calculate, that's a lot of, So but this has to come from the profit, because the private sector, the main economic entity, regardless of others, the main economic drive is to maximize profit. And they are the ones that drive the economy. It's not the government. The government doesn't. The private sector drives. They are the engine of growth, and it's a fact. That's something we have to. The FAST has to understand, the supporters. And unless, if you look at this in Australia, The government is there. They collect the revenue, but if you look at the major source of revenue, it's the private sector. So if we decide, if the government decides to raise the minimum wage up to the point whereby it will affect the maximization of profit, you're getting my point?
Yep.
And then it will, because it will have a multiplier effect on the economy, of course, and it's not good, It will lead to higher, inflation and all of this, and So I said to the members of Yasaki that I said, okay, because I understood, I know the economics. I said, okay, I know, but it's the government that has the final say, we'll see what will give it to them, because if the government says no, so it's a political tool, First, others may say, oh, this is, but that's how, they make that conscious decision because they're worried about, the growth of the private sector, because that's where most of the revenue that they collect, for taxation comes from. So it ended up that we settled, I think, with 350. I said, it's a win-win, But remember, at that time, it was the GDP was about 2 billion. Now we come to now I heard it's about $6. And how to calculate that? There are different methodologies. There are different formulas. But the most simple formula of calculating, we use the GDP. And Samoa now it's over 3 billion. I don't know, maybe 3.1 or probably 3.2. But let's use even numbers. Let's say 3 billion. And if you look at 3 billion, when you write it in numericals, this is, when we learn the maths, you expand it. If it's 10 times, 10 to the power of 2, then then you have to, which once you expand that, it's, 10 times 10, and that's if you remove the power. So it will make you understand more rather than seeing those. So if you look at a billion, for 1 billion, first we have the million. This is typical. For a million, there's about 6 zeros. 1 digit and the 6 zeros. That is a million. And then you have, you add all of that up to once you 10 million, 20 million, 30, 50. Once you reach 90 million, when you move up to the next one, then it's 100 million. It's this is because I explained to the kids, to my students, and some of them don't, because it's a maths.
Yeah.
They have to understand their maths and look, this is how it stands. Because when your father, when the old man and the old lady ask, what is a billion? Because we politics, we like talking about million and billion, and then they thought, oh. But when you expand, when you tell them, a billion, like 100 million, 200 million, so you have about 9 zeros, 500 million, that's half a billion, and then all the way up to 900 million. So when you add another 100 million, then it becomes 1,000 million, and that's a billion,
Yeah.
You're getting my point?
Yeah.
So when you explain this clearly to the old man and then they probably say, is that, or they will say, ooh, what up? It's a huge number. But if you just say, oh, it's just a billion, and a million, but you really have to go down to the maths, and expand and say, this is, so for 1 billion, it's equivalent to about 1,000 million, and that's a lot. So if you have another billion, which was accumulated under to the GDP, that's 2,000 billion. Now under Lao and Malitoa, and fast, we are now at the 300, at the 3 billion.
3,000.
So you see that steady growth, from within. So that's 3,000 million, and that's a lot. That's why when I heard the Prime Minister saying that, oh, this is a direct impact of the $1 million project, reaching that. I said, no, that's not. I mean, this is politics. I understand. I love to say, oh, it's just politics. But because you have to back this up with hardcore, statistics,
Yeah.
But if you look at that steady growth from Tulepa, HRPP stuff, it was still going up, So whatever government that comes along, like the FAST, they just stand on that solid foundation, and there's nothing. I mean, why can't you acknowledge, and say, because we know that under the last 4 years, under Fide, a lot of millions, but it should have been at least maybe 4 billion,
Okay.
if it's really,
If
you're
it was
getting
doing really well, yep.
yes, if it's because a lot of money, went out, but
That's right.
we just saw a steady growth.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And if there was a huge impact on that in the 5 years, then you all of a sudden then you have that significant growth. That statistics didn't witness that. They didn't say that.
Yeah.
So it's good that you understand. I mean, our listeners, are also listening to that.
Yeah.
And this is fundamental. This is basic macro and microeconomics, and you have to understand this if you want to be a politician, and even lawyers too. You need to understand all of this. Anyway, so coming back to your question, it's very important, for the $6. Remember I told you the reason why we made that decision, because it has to go back to
the GDP.
cabinet, to the parliament.
Yep.
To stick with, because we took the advice from the private sector. I don't know at the moment whether the private sector, agreed on the $6 that they are now proposing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do they usually have reports on
because-
those types of conversations with private companies, like with the private
Oh,
sector?
they should, because that's what we did. We invited them because this affects the businesses.
Yeah.
It affects, Now imagine $6, for example, and if you have, let's say 5 employees, and 6 multiplied by 8, 6, 8, that's $36, a day.
A day. Yeah.
And then you multiply that by 5, 5 days. So basically, it's probably somewhere like more than 200. Maybe roughly somewhere more than 200, maybe 250 a week. Because at the current situation, it's about 200 or even a bit less. So there's nothing wrong with that. That's if you have 1 or 2 employees, you can cater for it. But once you have 200, 300, that's another story.
You're talking big business then.
So there is a conscious decision making, and politicians have to really make sure. Look at the case of California. I think it's probably, correct me if I'm wrong, it's probably about $30 an hour now. US. And one of the critiques I read, some of these large, companies cannot afford that. So they're now transferring all the capital, both the human to particular taxes, because they have a fair, low inflation and good. So that's a kind of we have to be. But if we are to look at how to arrive at the $6, then we have to divide roughly on the population that GDP is 3 billion, like 3,000 million. I don't know whether there is an extra there, maybe 1.1 or 0.2. Then after that, you divide that 3 billion by the population now. It's now 217,000. So once you divide, the 3 billion roughly, let's use the round out numbers. Let's use 3,000 million. That's 3 billion divided by what's the
200,000, is it?
population? Like 200,
If we round it off.
200,000 rather than 217.
Yep.
Remove the other,
Yep.
which is so divide by 200,000. So it should come down to somewhere like maybe 15,
Okay.
maybe 15,000. That's what we call per capita. That's per capita income. So
Yep.
when we disperse the wealth of a nation, that's how we measure. We look at the GDP and then you divide it by the population. That's how much you need. That's how I get. If we are going to assess, the wealth. And then often I ask my students, are you getting your fair share of the, of your per capita, like looking into 15,000 per, I think, if you look at, and all of them, they look at it, so, because that's a reality. And they say, how can we measure it? Well, of course, that's why we have policies. That's why, because that GDP number, trickles down to the development of hospitals, the health sector, the education sector, tourism, you just name it, all the sectors, under the government. But if you look at it, the business community and everything, they're the ones, they're trying all of those. So the interesting thing is that, they now say, well, we've got to have good roads and all of that. So this is part of it. But the challenge that we are facing is that there's a lot of children going around, selling, what we call the vendors. It's really sad to see. It's getting worse, the problem. So that means we are, economically speaking, they didn't get their share, from this 15,000. When we look at it economically speaking. Yeah, and then we need to, this is one of the ways, for me, to calculate the minimum wage. Then you have to look at 365. If it's 365, days of the year, you take away all the working, all the
holidays and
the holidays, so once you have taken out all of those, then you are left with just working days. And I think it's somewhere like maybe 345 working days, or even less than that, because you need to put in the weekends as well, Saturdays and Sundays, and then you calculate, the hours, that we have, you have about 8 hours a day, and then you have about 5 days a week, 4 weeks,